Personally, though, I think we're in a cycle of rejuvenation where we're rejuvenating our past, and look how much stuff has been discovered in the last 30 years compared to the last 300. It's just mind blowing. Science is actually on our side now, and science is. Look at the subject of archaeoastronomy, for example. That's what I do. Astroarchaeology or archaeoastronomy, whichever you want to call it. It's a mixture of astronomy and archaeology. The reason that is so potent or so important a subject is because something like 90% or 95% of the monuments before 1500 BC have an astronomical alignment to them. And that is just incredible. I mean, everything before 1500 BC, 90% of them have an astronomical alignment. So astronomy was the key to our past. It's been around since, the very start, and it's been inherent in our nature to encode this stuff in buildings. For example, how far back this actually goes, there's a curious example of the Venus figurines. I don't know if you guys are aware of the Venus figurines, but there's several Venus figurines that have surfaced across Europe. I think some of these things date to about 30,000 BC. I've only ever seen one of them personally, and that's when I was in Austria, in Vienna, and they have one in the museum there, the Venus figurine. It's dated to about 30,000 BC. They're basically clay figurines, and they're showing a voluptuous woman. And the point is that one of the Venus figurines, it looks like the woman has one hand in the air and she's holding the crescent of a moon. And on the crescent of the moon, there is 13 lines. Now, 13 is a very important lunar number because 13 is the number of lunar months in the solar year. So right there in 30,000 BC, we have a lunar cycle being documented. Just to throw that one in, there is also...
Oh, right.
There is also bones that have been notch marks and scrape marks that have lunar calculations encoded in them. There's the Thai plaque, going back to the Paleolithic area. It's TAI, the Grotto de Thai, where it was found in a cave in France, and it's got complex lunar cycles being calculated in it. I believe there's even a record of a bone showing prime numbers being calculated, the mathematical prime numbers. Going back to really deep antiquity, like thousands and thousands of years before we even think that we could even develop mathematics.
So James, sorry,
just to recap, the problem is today, when we look back at the past, we can't see past the Greeks. We have this in our head that Greeks is like this kind of wall, and we don't look over it because the Greeks invented modern civilization.
Yes.
And that's just poppycock. It's just a notion. It's an imaginary line in our head, and we just need to get over it because the stuff that the Greeks invented was already around. Like I say, Pythagoras' theorem is encoded in the megaliths, and even the Babylonian stuff has shown sophisticated mathematics in their astronomy as well. And the Greeks just reinvented stuff, really, and we just need to see past that from our modern perspective.
You're absolutely right.
The Greeks were kind of like us then, Joe, because they were basically just researching work that had already gone before them.
Yeah. No, well, that's it. It's all research. You're right. Now, here's a question for you. Why did they do away with the 13th sign with, of the zodiac? Because if the 13, there's 13 months in a year, right? As far as okay, so there's also 13 signs of the zodiac. I think there's 13, and then of course you have each age, which is a certain part, and there's 13 of those. So I mean, like, what was the significance to dropping it? Why did they do that?
Maybe it was unlucky.
Sure. Yeah, well, I have my own idea on astrology anyway. I do study astrology. Actually, I call my own radio show Capricorn Radio. Not that I am a Capricorn, by the way, but I just bought the web name Capricorn Radio because it was available and it was an astrological sign, and I like astrology. But for astrology, for me, basically, it's a planetary effect. It's sun sign astrology, and there's a lot of science based in it. I actually don't look past the divination process that is encompassed in all astrology. When you look at the tabloid newspapers today, you'll get your star sign there and what's going to happen to you in the next month. And that's just all BS to me. Because divination and astrology, it's about 1% of what actually the real science is. but it's the 1% that everybody looks at, and it's actually, you know, it's got an adverse effect, because what it does is it puts people off the real astrology. When you say you're a star sign today, for example, if you want to say you're an air sign, a water sign, or whatever, you want to say somebody is either a Cancer, a Gemini, or a Leo, that means something in terms of practicality of the inherent characteristics of that sign. For example, Libra is the scales. That's to do with the balance and harmony of the Libra characteristic of a person. They seek justice. That's why the scales is used as the symbol for justice in the world today in courts. The crab is Cancer. It's to show the resourceful nature of the Cancerians. It's also to do with having a tough shell on the outside but being a real soft on the inside. So if you were to pick an animal to represent the Cancer, you would pick a crab, because it encompasses the nature of the Cancerian mindset, if you will.
I'll be me
again. Aries is the ram, it charges in. Aries is, I'm a Cancer as well, by the way. The Aries is the ram, and Aries basically charges in. All fire signs are very abrasive. They're very confrontational. They will also reserve their confrontation until they see their truth or justice to charge in. But the point is, Aries is the ram, and it will charge, and they're very confrontational, Aries. Some people call them warmongers for that reason, but it doesn't mean that they're aggressive or warmongery. It just means that they charge in and confront. But all fire signs like that. What makes the difference between a fire sign and an air sign basically is it's the cardinal, the mutable, and the fixed qualities. Basically, for every star sign there is, for every earth sign, there's going to be 3 different types. That's why you can either look at it as the 12 months of the zodiac, or you can say you're an earth sign but you're mutable, or you can say you're a cardinal sign and you're a water sign. It's just basically a way of breaking it down. But the point is, sun sign astrology is all based on solstices. And basically, the hinge point between Gemini and Cancer is the 24th of June, for example. So it's not this imaginary line that you walk over on the 21st of June and you suddenly become Cancer. Think of it as a sine wave going up and down all the way throughout the year. So if you rise up to middle Gemini, and then you fall down to the crossover point, and then you go down to middle Cancer, and then you rise up to the crossover point of Leo, and you keep going up and down this sine wave. The reason that is because the sun has actually a lot of magnetic poles. Think of this as electromagnetic radiation, by the way. This is the best way to understand astrology. The sun is 99% of the mass of our solar system. It's pumping out electromagnetic radiation at the Earth 24/7. Doesn't stop. It just keeps pumping at us. Now, there's 4 poles. There's on the equator, positive, negative. And there's also a positive and negative, the north and the south pole. So it's a 6-pole system, 4 around the equator and 1 north and south. And this changes every 28 days. It's probably about 29 in days, but it's also the rotation of the Earth that helps it along. This is why we have a complex system, but it's not that complex really. We have a tilt on the Earth, okay? What people don't realize is that in summer and in winter, we're the exact same distance from the sun. It's just the tilt of the Earth pushing us away. People think we get closer to the sun in summer and we get further away in winter. Not really in terms of our motion around the sun. It's only the tilt of the Earth that does that. So we're actually further away from the sun in spring and in autumn. It's in an oval trajectory. So as this cycle goes around the sun, we get closer towards the sun, closer towards the electromagnetic radiation, therefore more of it falls on us. So in summertime, we get subjected to more solar radiation. That's why the star signs around Gemini and Cancer are more potent. They get pumped with more solar radiation than in the wintertime. They're more abrasive signs. Basically, think about it like this: the humans born on this planet, we are all electromagnetic beings, whether we like it or not. The Earth has its own magnetic shield. It protects us from most of the solar radiation, but some of it does get in. Our bodies have, our heart has its own electromagnetic field. The brain has its own electromagnetic field, and we are susceptible to electromagnetic radiation. If you put somebody in a Faraday cage, for example, which is basically, Michael Faraday did this, the inventor of electromagnetism. He basically stood inside a metal cage and zapped it with electricity, and he didn't get a shock because he stood inside it. So when we're totally shielded from something in a Faraday cage, and there's been many psychological experiments done on this, but if we're inside a metal cage, we actually get cut off from the electromagnetic radiation outside. That includes the sun. We can actually get depressed. We can get very withdrawn. We can even go into hysteric of laughter and crying and everything. You know, they've got people to do basic tests. Some people can't even finish the test, are basically basic aptitude tests, while they're sitting in a Faraday cage. There has been one experiment done where a woman has been gone into a cave in Colorado, or I think it was a bunker, a military bunker. She was cut off from the sun for something like 35 days. It was after day 26 that she actually literally lost the plot. Her waking days were 35 hours long. She had no idea or sense of time anymore. Her menstrual cycle has totally ceased and stopped, which tells us that we need to have the sun. We can't even leave our own solar system and reproduce because we need the sun to activate our menstrual cycle in females. So the sun is incredibly important to us, and we react to the sun. When you think of it in terms of sun sign astrology, it's also Mercury that actually affects that goes into Chinese astrology. Mercury affects this 12-year cycle. That's why a Cancer born in 1984 is different to one born in 1988, because 1988 was the year of the dragon. That was when the solar cycles were pumping the Earth, as they do every 12 years. What happens is you have a massive solar storm every 12 years, and then it falls away exponentially in a long sloping curve, and then it goes boom again and blows off a lot of electromagnetic radiation. So the Chinese astrology system really just concentrates on this 12-year cycle, and then the Western astrology really just concentrates on this 12-month cycle. So if you put both systems together to say that you are a Pisces dragon or a Capricorn boar or whatever, you pick the animal characteristic of the Western zodiac and the animal characteristic of the Eastern zodiac. Both characteristics give you a really super philosophy. And if you just look at the characteristic behavior, it was Carl Jung that actually really drew attention to this, and what you would call astropsychology. It's the behaviorism of people born between certain dates. So basically, if you want to say Leo from the 21st of July to the 21st of August, those people known as Leos show this characteristics of the lion. Very, very proud, very, very loving, very natural, but very, very protective as well. All Leos that I know are like that. They're very, very confrontational because they're a fire sign. The reason it changes between earth, fire, wind, and water is because of the four poles of the magnetic equator of the sun. It goes positive, negative, positive, negative. That's why it keeps changing between earth, fire, wind, and water. Otherwise, we'd all have the same zodiac. When you look at it's quite a complex system to explain, but when you look at the magnetic poles of the equator of the sun, it explains why there's a four-pole shift every earth, fire, wind, water, earth, fire, wind, water, and it repeats like that. It keeps on going. And it also shows you why there is constantly the flipping of the poles every 12 years. What happens is Mercury drags these sunspots around, and the core of Mercury actually solidifies until all these sunspot cycles build up. And what happens is gravitational effects makes the core of Mercury become liquid again. And what happens is you have sunspot cycles flaring up every 12 years. There are also bigger ones. What we do know is from Chinese astrology dating to at least, astronomy and astrology was all the same to the Chinese. The great thing about the Chinese is that they have been in existence since 3000 BC. They are never broken as a civilization. If you want to find meteors or asteroids, you'll find them in the Chinese records. You can see astronomical data. You can see supernova explosions being recorded there. It's all in there. But what the Chinese did was they did something very clever. They looked at the sun projected it onto rice paper because they couldn't look at it with the naked eye. And as they projected it onto rice paper, they realized something. They realized that there was these brown and black spots appearing on the sun, and that there was a conglomeration of them every 12 years, that they would come up in large numbers every 12 years and then they would fall away. So they call this the year of the dragon. This was the year, that's what's known as 1988, the year of the dragon, 2000, 2012, all year of the dragon. They're all linked with solar sunspot cycles. And that's what the whole basis of Chinese astrology is. And what they realized was that different babies were being born in the year of the dragon. They were more enigmatic, they were more energetic. Of course they were energetic because they were getting extra solar radiation from the sun. If you take the whole system of Chinese astrology, it's just the same. It's just a little microcosm if you want to break it into a further 12 months. It's the exact same thing. It's like there's different levels of radiation hitting the Earth during 12 months of the year. And as electromagnetic beings, we react to this. There's a great book called Mind, Body and Electromagnetism by John Evans. It's probably out of print now, but it really explains the human anatomy and how we are electromagnetic beings and how we react to it. Perhaps that's a bit too much on astrology for you guys, but that's how I see astrology. That's how I see astrology. It's a sun sign astrology. Astrologers hate me saying this, by the way, because I don't see it more beneficial past the astropsychology. To me, I don't see the difference between astrology or psychology. They both explain the behavior of humans with respect to a cause. Behaviorism, as in a purely psychological sense, could be down to how you were reared. It could be down to your schooling, could be down to a bad father or a good father, a bad mother or a good mother. Could be down to having no parenting. It could be down to dysfunctionality, whatever. It doesn't really typify the cause. Whereas astrology is basically talking about the same thing. The behaviorism of humans only saying that it's a planetary effect due to the month you were born setting the tone. It doesn't mean that it defines the rest of your life. It just gives you the vehicle to drive in if you wish. So for me, I'm a Cancer. I'm incredibly resourceful. I'm a cardinal sign, which means I'm a leader. I like to lead from the front. Cancers are incredibly intuitive. They have massive memories as well. They usually have, because they're a water sign. Water signs have a vast memory. They seem to retain knowledge. It doesn't make me any better than another star sign. It doesn't make me any worse.
Oh, James, it does. It does. Don't talk us down. Come on, us Cancers are the best for sure, man. Come on.
Well, I tell people that. I tell that to other Cancers when nobody's around.
It's because we're awfully modest as well. That's what it is.
But the thing is, the thing is as well, I'm born middle Cancer, so I'm very stereotypical. People born on the cusp of Cancer and Gemini, for example, you know, if you really want to, are different to middle Cancer as the same as the people born on the cusp of Leo and Cancer. So if you really want to calculate it, and this is why astrology is very complex, because if you think about it, there's 12 months of the zodiac during the year. And I don't buy into the 13th zodiac sign, by the way. I think there's a lot of astronomy to kind of disinformation on that. But it really doesn't matter how many signs there are, other than it's between certain dates, the 21st to the 21st. Basically, 22nd. Sometimes people say 22nd to the 22nd.
Oh, Joe Joseph better watch himself. He'll be the first to go when Bill Gates.
It's either I'm
vaccines.
It's either I'm a Sagittarius or I'm an Ophiucan.
The point is, right, the point is there could well be 432 signs if you really want to look at it. There could be, you know, starting at Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, all the way right through back again to Pisces. You know, there's those 12 signs of the zodiac. But then there's also the 12 Chinese signs, the year you were born. So if you really want to count it, there's 12 times 12. There's 144. Then if you want to look at it, then there's early Cancer, middle Cancer, late Cancer. Early Leo, middle Leo, late Leo. So if you want to count that, then there's 3 signs, 3 miniature signs again. So that's 3 times 144, that's 432. And when you really think about it like that, there's 432 basic characteristics of people on this planet in astrological terms. And from what I see, the people that are on the cusp are the most interesting. People born near the 21st of the month, a couple of days either side, are incredibly interesting, because these are the people you learn astrology from, because you see the tug of war going on. I have a brother born on the cusp. He's on the cusp of Virgo and Libra, and you know he's very, very Virgo, but you'll see the Libra come out in him sometimes, and you know, both characteristics are there, but in smaller quantities. I'll see people that are born in the middle of Virgo, and they're incredibly analytical, incredibly nature orientated. And all the characteristics are there. But people born on the cusp of Virgo and Libra, for example, you see a different playoff. People that are, again, born middle Aquarius. Aquarius are very into mind and mentalism. My father's Aquarius, pure genius. They are really geniuses. They're very, very shrewd people. Very logical and very practical as well. That's the signs of an air sign as well. They're very technical, logical orientated, but very humanitarian. They're the water bearers. They stand up for justice and humanitarianism as well. Incredibly easy to spot in Aquarian in nature, if you knew what to look for. But what I find is that astrology proves itself to me time and time again, but only in terms of behaviorism. So, for example, if you tell me somebody's an Aquarius or somebody's Capricorn or whatever, I might probably guess it. It doesn't mean I profess to know anything about that person. At the end of the day, if you're a Capricorn, you're hard work and you're diligent, you'll outwork anybody in the zodiac because that's your star sign. But it doesn't mean that I can say who you are as a person or define you. Not at all. Your vehicle is just the journey is different for everybody from A to B. It's just the vehicle you're given is either a Capricorn or a Gemini or whatever. And to understand that in a basic sense in terms of behaviorism is great. To go past that and try to do divination and say, well, you've got all these characteristics and there's going to be a shift in alignments of planets, and then all of a sudden you're going to be prone to doing this, so you're going to do this. It's so wild and it's based on extrapolation of a multitude of things that it's just pure guesswork. It's just pure guesswork, and there's so much extrapolation in it. It's of little value to me. However, understanding the behaviorism of people in terms of astrological signs and sun sign astrology, I think it's incredibly important.
It is important, and we'll continue this on the other side of the break. Man, this is flying by this Freaky Friday, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, truthfrequencyradio.com. We'll be right back.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. Joe Joseph here. It's Freaky Friday on Truth Frequency Radio, truthfrequencyradio.com. And, of course, I got the KBS crew with me. Johnny King is in the house, and James Swagger's here and has been talking about some fascinating stuff. I love getting into astrology.
What's happened to John King, Joe? John King's off.
Wait a minute. You just so anyway, the name of this new segment that we have is called Johnny on the Spot. Johnny, you're up. Go ahead.
Classic.
Yes.
Missed me?
Yeah. Anyway, Johnny, you've been hearing this conversation. Now, you have a background in this as well, don't you? Hmm?
My background in this is more mystical.
Exactly. But there's a certain mystical part of this, don't you think?
Yes. I tend to agree with him that the ancients did know a lot about mathematics, and a lot of the knowledge was lost. And I did have a question for him earlier in the last segment. This light bulb switch that you throw to kill people, does it have a dimmer on it so you can do it more slowly?
Oh, I like it.
All right. So anyway, Johnny, I mean, seriously, the mystical side is an important. I think that. Well, let's just say this: the spiritual side is, I think, a very important component of all this. Whereas, yes, the astrology and the signs, they definitely define like a person as far as like their base characteristics. And if you know astrology, and you say, hey, man, what's your birthday? You can pretty much, if you don't know the person, you can basically get like a basic vision in your head of what this person's like, just based on when they were born, if you know it that well. So
if you know it that well, and I didn't mean to go on a major rant on astrological systems, but anything of a system to me is of interest. I don't care if it's the human body, psychology, engineering, science, astronomy. Everything is a system in this world. Well, it's just a matter of what way you want to define the system or break the system down. And astrology to me is just another system.
Well, it's like James, I want to point this out real quick to add to your system point is, you're familiar with CERN,
Sure.
The Large Hadron Collider. And, they recently did some work where they were trying to figure out mathematically if the universe is ordered or if it was random. and they figured out from a mathematical perspective that it's ordered, that there is a system to everything, and that it's mathematically proven.
I think the Fibonacci number wouldn't be inherent in that. If you actually look at the work of Nassim Haramein, you'll see that he came up with something very interesting with the scaling law, and that the Fibonacci number is inherent in that. Whether you look at large galaxies or the human body or even the atomic scale, that the Fibonacci scaling law is literally there right across the board on everything. But yeah, I think I'm fully with that. But in terms of the astrology, just to wrap on that, I mean, I think, yeah, if you knew that somebody's date of birth, you basically, you need to break it into their month and the year, and define what each one really means. The Chinese concentrated, like I said, on the year you were born, but kind of ignored the rest. And then that the Western astrology concentrates on the month you were born. And then it's not that they ignore the year you were born, it's just that they take so much jargon to explain it with charts and stuff. Like, you know, if you just talk about the two of them together to say somebody is a dragon and somebody is a Pisces, and then, you know, put the two together, you get this super philosophically very, very simplified. And that's what I was trying to convey. But like I say, I like it as a system, and I think it's a very valuable system, which does date back to the time of the Egyptians. I think the oldest zodiac we have is the Dendera zodiac, of which they were drawing. The thing is, you got to understand that these guys were drawing in hieroglyphs, and that they explain things through terms of ideology. When they wrote hieroglyphs on the wall, they would use birds, the characteristics of animals, and what that animal did. For example, the scarab beetle would do one thing, the crocodile would do another thing, how the birds would devour animals and cleanse the bodies and all that. And whatever that animal did, whatever that specific function did, again, the crab as well, you know, whatever its resources was as an animal and its characteristics, was a way of explaining a very complex idea with just one picture. And in the same way, it's what they did with the zodiac. The Dendera zodiac is incredibly sophisticated. It's no different to our zodiac today. We know it goes back to at least the time of the Egyptians. And these guys were building pyramids that we can barely replicate today. They reckon if we were given an unlimited checkbook to go and build this thing, that we couldn't even get an engineering firm that would actually build it to the same spec. I think it's been quoted that if you just took the volume of the pyramid and just dumped it into the hole in the ground, you know, it would take you 20 years probably to fill it up. You know, and
wasn't there just a recent amateur researcher that was stumbled upon an even more ancient pyramid than the Pyramid of Giza that dwarfed the pyramids of Giza as far as in size? I think it was back in 2010. Somebody on Google Earth went and found this ancient pyramid from like the first dynasty, and it was huge.
Sure, you know, that's another thing as well. I mean, pyramids are all over the planet as well, and pyramids are incredibly sophisticated in mathematics. How you build them, the angles, I mean, you can't just build a pyramid because you want to. You can't just build it and throw it together with slave labor. You can't even just throw it upwards. It won't function, or it won't work. By the time you get to the top, it'll be all out of alignment. To get something like the Great Pyramid built, or any of the other pyramids all around the globe, you need a good mathematician. And I mean, when I say a good mathematician, somebody who is fluid in geometry, trigonometry, and number systems, to get the angle right so that it all matches by the time you get to the top. Otherwise, it's just going to fall down or not going to last very long. But yeah, you know, again, pyramidology, if you want to call it that. Again, it encompasses, I meant to mention this earlier, that the Great Pyramid encompasses the polar circumference and the equatorial circumference in its own ratio. If you put a pyramid, most people don't even realize this, if you put the Great Pyramid inside the Earth until it touches all the corners, in other words, that the tip of the pyramid was touching the South Pole, for example, let's say put it upside down, and that the four corners of the pyramid was touching the Earth, it would be at a scale of 1 to 43,200. And 43,200 is an incredibly important number. It's related to the zodiac in terms of precession. It's you can divide it by the numbers of zodiacal years. 2,160 years divides into 43,200 perfectly. It's incredibly important number 432 in terms of music. It's also encoded in the megaliths as well. Belfast Henge, if you multiply the first three numbers of the coordinates of Belfast Henge, you get 42,200. Again, it's encompassed with the unit of feet. But if you basically put this pyramid inside the Earth, not only does it fit in at a scale model of 1 is to 42,200, but it touches the globe at exactly 30 degrees of latitude, which is where the pyramid is built. In other words, a large-scale model of the pyramid inside the Earth touches the globe at exactly the point where the pyramid is. The pyramid is actually telling you where it is at, in other words, on the globe, if that makes sense.
I'd never heard that before.
You can basically put a pyramid inside the Earth and exactly upside down. It will touch it at 30 degrees latitude. Here's the thing, where the pyramid is built, it's not actually at 30 degrees latitude, because if you put it at 30 degrees latitude, it would sink into the ground. It's a 6 million ton monument in weight. It weighs, there's 2.25 million tons, all weighing 2 or 3 tons each block. So 2.25 million blocks at 2 or 3 tons. It weighs about 6 million tons basically in mass.
Wow.
So it has to be built on solid bedrock. You couldn't even put concrete in the ground. The concrete would sink as well. So you have to put it on bedrock, and the closest piece of bedrock that could take a 6 million ton monument is at Giza, and its closest point to the 30 degree latitude, within a couple of decimal points. So that's why it's built there on that bedrock plateau, number one, because it's a structural thing, but it's also there at the 30 degree latitude. It's also more accurately aligned to north, south, east, and west than Greenwich Mean Time. It's something like 9/60ths of a degree. Greenwich Mean Time is 9/60ths of a degree, and the Great Pyramid is 3/60ths of a degree. It's 3 times more accurate than Greenwich Mean Time, and Greenwich Mean Time was done with lasers. So, I mean, the precision, some people say it might have been actually done to perfect precision, and it's just the time on the last 5,000 years is off 3/60ths of a degree. However you want to look at it, it's got north, south, east, and west perfectly aligned, and also where it's located at. If you drew a line of north-south longitudinal line going through the Great Pyramid, it hits the most landmass at that point. And if you drew an east-west line going through the pyramid, it would hit the most landmass around that latitude around the globe. In other words, exactly where it's located at is the most geodetically stable place on the planet for earthquakes, because it hits more rings of latitude. The ring of latitude and the ring of longitude hits more landmass. There's a geodetic reason for that, or an earth science reason for that. But it's an incredibly, very special place on the globe. It's probably the only place on the globe that you can get all those measurements to incorporate. But basically, it's got pi encoded into it. It's got the Fibonacci number encoded into it. It's got the golden ratio, which is another number that's related to the golden ratio, or the Fibonacci ratio. But basically, the height of the pyramid and the circumference of the pyramid is encoded with this scaled ratio of the polar and the equatorial circumference. Not just one, but both. This is the funny thing. To do that, you have to build a pyramid at a very special angle, 53.5 degrees, something like that. So most people think the pyramid's at 45 degrees, a nice half an angle, half a 90 degrees, but it's not. It's at a very special angle, and it's only at that angle that you get those two ratios, the ratio of the polar and the equatorial circumference, encoded in the Great Pyramid. So it tells you whoever built it at that special angle knew what they were doing. They built it at that angle for a reason.
That's really unbelievable. You know, it also makes you wonder. There's a lot of conjecture out there and discussion on the topic that the pyramids actually were like they channeled energy, and perhaps even were part of a global energy transmission, like a wireless transmission system. Sure. I mean, have you looked into that? I
have. I've had Chris Dunn on my show a couple of times, and I'm totally open to that. it implies high-tech knowledge.
Yeah.
Where they got the high-tech knowledge from, leave that on the shelf at the moment. But
Hmm.
if you look at the shafts, they are at 35 centimeters in width. And 35 centimeters is the width of a microwave radar beam. Microwave beams work at basically 35 centimeters. It's an incredibly weird diameter to put these shafts. You can't fit down them. 35 centimeters are just basically about a foot wide.
Yeah.
But they are microwave beams. Chris Dunn would refer to them as masers. He reckons that the background radiation of space, which is basically microwaves, it's what we call the background radiation. It was picked up by that big giant ear in America when they used to clean the pigeon dung out of it. They kept getting this background noise. It was basically the microwave radiation in space. So we have microwave radiation just leaking all around us. Perhaps the Great Pyramid collected that. That's the basics of Chris Dunn's theory. It is explained by the 35 centimeter width of the passageway. As the microwave beams would feed into the Great Pyramid, they were probably collecting gases and using salts to mix them, and it was probably pumping out energy as a result. It could have been an energy machine. He says perhaps it functioned like a machine because it looks like a machine. There is a curious thing about the two shafts on the other side, that there's what they call these doors inside the chambers. However, there are what looks like copper handles on a door. They call them doors, but you couldn't fit down the chamber to get to the door. They have to send robots down because nobody else can fit inside them. It seems just nonsensical to call them doors, but that's what the Egyptologists have labeled them. However, Chris Dunn predicted that at the end of one of the shafts on the other side, you would find another copper handle, and it would be melted because it would be a cathode and an anode, like an electrical battery basically, or what he called a fluid switch. And what we do have is that exact thing that was found. It was it looks like a copper handle, but Chris calls it an electrode. As an engineer and a systems analyst, I have looked at Chris Dunn's theory of the Giza power plant, as he calls it. And I can't find fault in it. I don't think there's enough there to say that he's fully right, because there are components that are being destroyed and missing. However, in what is laid out, I'm totally in compliance with it, because yes, it would collect the background radiation. Yes, it would be people. It's also vibrating at a certain frequency as well. When I've been inside the King's Chamber, by the way, I've been oming and chanting in there, having the whole pyramid to myself this year. I was there in February. You can hear conversations in the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber, and it's going through hundreds of feet of rock. The acoustics is so advanced in there. It's probably the most acoustically tuned building on the planet, or structure on the planet. Wow. Maybe second only to the Hypogeme in Malta, another megalithic site in Malta.
I never got to go. I never got to go in the Great Pyramid in Giza, but I did get to climb it. So I got to the top of it. Yeah, I got to the top of it.
Wow. Nice. Well, I never got to climb it, but I got to go inside it, and it is a fascinating monument. How many people have come to there, engineers or naysayers or whatever, just to marvel at that thing and just question it. It beggars so many questions that that it exists there.
I think we've got some kind of genetic memory as well from there, James, because everyone that I know, they've all got a pull to Egypt. They're all fascinated by that.
Sure. I personally think, right, whoever built the pyramid was in possession of Earth metrology, basically the measurement of the Earth, that is the polar and the equatorial circumference. And I think whoever measured the Earth, I think maybe we'll bring in Atlantis at this point, because there is links between Atlantis and Egypt through Plato's uncle. But Solon in Egypt talked about Atlantis, but I think the common source would be some sort of an Atlantean civilization, if you want to call it that, and that the megalithic builders of Western Europe, who were around the same time frame as the Egyptians, I think it's so incredibly ironic that these guys are existing in the same time frame in the Mediterranean basin, and nobody's supposed to linking these guys up. I think there was a transfer of knowledge there for sure. And both civilizations or cultures show knowledge of Earth metrology or geodetic surveying. whatever you want to call it. They both seem to have measurements that encode the circumference of the Earth, whether it's the foot, or the Great Pyramid, or the megalithic yard, or the Egyptian cubit. It all seems to encompass some sort of an Earth mythology. Maybe this is descendants of Atlantis. Maybe a lot of people think nowadays that the descendants of Atlantis, if you want to call Atlantis in a location that's sunk beneath the waves, or call it coastline that got swallowed up by rising sea levels, whatever, doesn't really matter at this stage. I think that the survivors of this, you talk about the flood as well. I mean, you have the Epic of Gilgamesh talking about the flood. It's Noah's flood. It's all encoded in the Bible, and the Bible's represented in the Sumerian myths as well. There isn't an ancient culture in the world that doesn't talk about civilization coming from the seas. The Aztecs, the Toltecs all talk about people with beards coming from the seas. The Irish as well. Their mythology talks about the Tuatha De Danann coming and landing on a mountain coming from the western seas. I have no doubt that every culture is not talking about a flood for no reason. You know, that we all came from a common source. It makes sense, like. You know, and as a result, there is fragments of the original source knowledge, and I think people try to map the globe again. I think people basically tried to, know their location. If they were so advanced before, look, for example, the Piri Reis map of 4000 BC. If these guys were traversing as far as Antarctica and South America and all across the globe and map making,